Um, on the consent agenda, we have the minutes of the previous meetings and the December 2020 invoices.
So moved.
Alderman Pleitner. Alderman Newmeyer? Okay, Alderman Newmeyer. Any discussion or problem with those? And again, please say aye and raise your hands. All in favor, say aye. It looks like it's unanimous, Susan. Thank you. Mayor's business, I'll do this pretty quick. I apologize, I had something written out, but I kind of misplaced it today in my turmoil at home. I would like to thank a couple people, Ron Boyd especially. He was 27 years on the Park and Rec board, and I know he chaired it for numerous years. And also, he was the Park and Rec commissioner for the Plan Commission. So he worked diligently in that capacity. A lot of hours he spent. Again, the hardest thing is to find volunteers. So I would really like to thank Ron Boyd for his service to the community. Also, for the library board, our good friend Marie Zerbis. She had 25 years of service to the library board, dedicated wholeheartedly to that organization. So Marie and Ron, thank you for your service. Again, it's one of the hardest things you can get is volunteers. And to serve that long, the city owes them a thanks for that. The next common council meeting will be held on February 17th. And again, why was that, Susan? I forgot.
The rescheduling for the council meeting was because of the election. Right?
Oh, there's an election on.
The spring primary is being held on Tuesday, the 16th.
Okay.
So the council meeting is being moved same time, just the next day on Wednesday, the 17th of February.
So everybody knows it's moved to the Wednesday, the 17th.
And then the reminders will go out on social media, website, Facebook.
Okay. And then the appointment of an election inspector for 2021, which would be Holly Osterman.
Holly has recently retired and reached out to me with an interest in serving. I think she'd be an excellent addition. And this will be an opportunity with 2 elections this year to begin her training. So I would appreciate an appointment with Holly.
And I've known Holly for 20, 30 years. Excellent person, dedicated to the city. Again, one of the ones that now she's volunteered. I would think she might want to get on a commission or a board or something and donate her time to the city. So my thanks goes to Holly. Moving right along, officer staff.
We need to have a motion on that.
Oh,
So I'll move to appoint Holly Osterman as election inspector for 2021.
Alderman Benning. The second, Alderman Tierney. All in favor, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Okay, unanimous again. Thank you. I apologize for that. And officers and staff report. Rob, your engineer's report.
Yeah, just one item. We have Michael down at the marina found some difficulties with blocking the sewer, and it will.
You're not coming through at all.
Oh. Okay. Can we now? Can we hear now?
You on a cell phone or hard line?
Yeah, I'm on my cell phone. I can get on the hard line.
Yeah, that's why. Should be on a landline.
Yeah, it should be on a landline. So let me move to, while you do that, let me move to the city planner, Mr. Harris.
Sure thing. Okay.
Just a couple of announcements. Looks like February Plan Commission agenda is starting to fill up, and we're looking at about 8 to 9 items on that, possibly about 2 items for Design Review Board in the month of February. And just as a FYI to the council, and this is related to a planned downtown plan process later in the year, I made an application to the Coastal Management Grant to augment our existing downtown plan budget by another $36,000. We had a good, my application was received. There was a recommendation initially for approval. I made a presentation to the Coastal Management Grant for that, and then they are in deliberations, and I should know, if memory serves, a couple months or a month or two from now, to see if we'll have a larger budget for a downtown plan.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Harris. Rob, you're next. Can you go back to city engineer?
Okay, my apologies. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the only ongoing project we have right now is Michael's performing the sewer lining. They've encountered some problems down there, so that's extended their work a little bit, but they do intend to have the pipe section line tomorrow.
Nope, we can't hear you again. Okay. Alderman Benning's gonna check it out. Well, can we move down to Susan, the city clerk's report?
Okay, circling back again, this relates to the spring primary, which will be held on Tuesday, February 16th. Polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. Early voting by absentee ballot in person began actually today. And that's being run from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, which will end on the 12th. Friday the 12th will be held till 5 p.m. We also are mailing out absentees by mail upon request with an application, and voter registration in person is being held at the same time. Otherwise, you can always register and vote on election day. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Rob, will try you one more time.
All right. Again, my apologies. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So Michael's construction is in the parking lot by the marina, lining the sanitary sewer pipe tomorrow, and they should be complete at the end of the day, barring any difficulties.
Okay. Any questions for Rob? Okay, thanks. Move on to item 6, which is public appearances and comments. Is there anybody here in the audience for public appearances and comments? Anybody on the phone? Okay, if you just want to step over to the podium, just give your name, and usually you have 3 minutes, okay? Turn on the mic, yep. That's it.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, awesome. So my name is Joe Burke, Porta alumni and Eagle Scout. Went to a college for about a year and then decided it was better to take a break. Yeah, so some of my main points, I guess, today. First point I wanted to bring up is, I guess, the Newport Shores development. I know a lot of people in the Port Washington Voice group had some concerns, I guess. I guess I wanted to give you guys some time to, or maybe ANSE developments to speak to get more detail about that and what the status of that is, I guess. Or however you want to do that. Do you want to do that now, or?
So this is not a discussion. You
Okay.
get your 3 minutes of
Okay.
state, and that's it.
I guess moving on. Prairie's Edge. I'm curious about the status of it, and what exactly is going to go in there. I know I saw a trailer that's parked up there. Not sure if they're planning on starting that in spring or what's all going on there. moving on to the next point, the Blues Factory, just curious about the status of that, what's all going on with that. I've had some discussions with Gershon. Sounds like a pretty good idea from my point of view. I don't know a lot about it, but I'm curious about hearing some more about it. And in closing, it was nice to meet you all, and I look forward to getting to know all of you.
Thanks, Joe. I just want to ask the city administrator, who should he contact, his alderman in his district for those questions, or city staff?
He can contact either his alder, or he can contact me directly, and I can certainly answer any questions.
Okay, all right. Yep. And it's always best to do that with an email, okay, Joe? And is there anybody, okay, just wait till he's done and then give him his spacing and then just say, state your name. I should apologize, I should have told him, it's not a discussion back and forth, you get 3 minutes to comment. Okay. Thank you. Go right ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Christina Brickner. I'm here representing B3. Today, you're going to hear a proposal from the Park and Rec for the beer garden, basically to umbrella the beer gardens under the Friends of Park and Rec in order to alleviate some of the costs associated to insurance, and in turn, share the profits across all of the beer gardens equally among the organizations hosting them. 50% of those profits going to the Friends of Park and Rec. Excuse me. B3 opposes this proposal primarily because, you know, that the last year's beer gardens, a number of organizations were not able to hold theirs because of the changes that took place last year as a result of COVID. Insurance was the biggest one because of the cost. A lot of the insurance, they couldn't afford it. Those changes were the prohibitor. I think that if we put everything under the umbrella of the Friends of Park and Rec, we're going to lose some of the charm with the beer gardens. You're not going to be incentivized as an organization to work harder. That I'm not going to want to do the Land Regatta. Why try especially hard to make my beer garden successful if I'm not going to see the rewards of my efforts on that? Every time I hold a beer, our beer garden we're always dedicating the profits towards a specific project. I'm not going to be aware of what those are. And I'm probably going to lose profits because across the board, people are not going to be motivated to make theirs extra successful. They're not going to be getting their own brews, their own music. It's not going to be unique across the board. It can't be. I think that we need to revisit the regulations that were put in place last year and try to make them more approachable, particularly in the insurance, so that those costs are not as high for the smaller organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Sure, come on, step up, please. As I said, just state your name and.
Hi, my name's Andrew Bulwark. I'm new to Port Washington, and I know we're going to be talking about this later with this conditional use permit about the used car sale dealership and automotive service up on 32 there. This directly affects me. I am the adjacent property to it. I guess I just have some concerns with it about what the proposals were. I was just given a slight plan layout the other day. My property is adjacent to the south. It says that we're only supposed to have a 7-foot buffer in between. Behind us, the alleyway's got a 10-foot buffer. It says there's supposed to be arborvitae there. I guess, for noise complaints and stuff like that, they also want to park cars right next to my property there. I'd like at least a 10-foot buffer, and these arborvitae need to be a certain height because my house is a 3-story house and I don't want to be looking down on used cars all the time. So I guess another concern of mine too is all the additional traffic that's going to be brought in with trucking in I just have a little kid at home now, so I guess all the additional traffic being trucked in with the cars, what are they doing with the test drives? I mean, in the state of Wisconsin, you're not allowed to test drive through residential areas. This business is being placed right in the middle of a residential area. I guess just the used car part of it's kind of got me a little worried because it's bringing in a lot of extra traffic and a lot of extra people. And I have little kids that I'd like to worry about, and there's neighbors behind me that have little kids as well that are directly adjacent to this potential business. So I guess I just want a little more clarification tonight on what your plans are to kind of block this off from the residents right around them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then as far as the actual process of getting them called up, that's largely up to the experts.
Is there anybody on the phone that wants to do a public comment? Anybody else in the audience? Okay, as soon as he's done. Okay, thank you. And just so you know, there will be a public hearing on that matter later on the agenda.
Hello, I'm Tom Evans. I'm the president of the Stars and Stripes Legacy Club. I basically came to echo the comments that she made from B3. We have many concerns, exactly the ones that she had for one, and a number of other things. The split, the profit sharing, also the loss of control of some of the things which we're actually quite adept at handling ourselves. So that's just really, I'm just hoping this doesn't get pushed through without a chance for us all to sit down and have meaningful discussion on what our ideas are, what parts of this plan work and what parts don't. So, thank you.
Thank you. And anybody else? Seeing no hands, I guess I will close public appearances and comments. I'll move on to finance and licensing. I'm going to move things around if after you're done with this and get Kylie and Dan, if that's possible. Or do you want me to do that right away, guys? Okay. All right. Well, then let's move on to 8A. Dan, that would be you for your first. Because this will be 2 to 5 minutes.
Okay. Consider Strand Engineering for design, bidding, and construction-related services for the UV disinfection system upgrade at the wastewater treatment plant. This is a planned capital project for 2021. It was one of the first topics identified in the Strand report as needing attention. And so we planned it for this year. Again, this is a not-to-exceed price of $44,000. The contract has been approved by Eric. And are there any questions?
When will this work take place, Dan? When is it scheduled?
For it probably the latter half of this year.
Okay.
There's going to be a 12 to 16 week lead time on the equipment probably once it's ordered.
Fall, Q3, Q4, somewhere?
Yeah, I would say the last quarter for sure.
Okay. Any other questions for Dan?
Was approved downstairs at Finance and License as well.
Okay. Can we have a motion up here to approve it?
One question, Mayor.
Okay.
And Dan, going to prompt you here a little bit. If you can just walk through what we talked about, the scope of work that Strand will be performing for this amount of money. And hit your mic on. Turn your mic on, Dan.
Okay, they will be taking this project from the start, designing the system with a complete new set of drawings. We don't have very good drawings down there right now, so there's going to be a fair amount of work on the drawings. All the bidding and construction-related services, including follow-up oversight on the project with construction management. So there's quite a bit of work involved here.
Thanks, Dan. And with that, I'll move to approve that we retain Strand Engineering for design and oversight of the project.
Alderman Benning is the motion.
I'll second.
Alderman Plaitner is the motion. Second is Alderman Plaitner.
And I guess I should ask city attorney if he's reviewed it.
I did, yes, and I approve it.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Again, all in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed? Unanimous again, Susan? Thank you. Kylie, do you want to go through yours quick, or you said you're going to wait for other stuff? Do you want to wait for the whole meeting, or? I want Dan to do his so he could leave. Respecting staff's time and all the time you guys put in. What would you like to do, Kylie? Okay, with that, then I would do, because people are here for that, item C, Park and Rec Board, we're going to do the possible action proposed 2021 beer garden operation plan. It might be a little bit longer, and there are people here for that, so with respect to them, we'll do yours. Yep, it's on with the red button then.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so tonight I'm bringing to you the proposed beer garden operational plan. Really over the last 6 years, more recently over the last 3 years, the beer garden has really grown tremendously, which is awesome and phenomenal. But with that, we've seen a lot of issues, current issues that have been arising with that, and that is why I am presenting a restructuring, a reorganization to address those current issues. Some of those are just the sustainability of the beer garden operations and making sure that those can continue. Those are highlighted throughout the memo here. And then just the inconsistency over the 15 beer garden dates of it being essentially a different event each Saturday. And so trying to create more consistency with that. And just the overall fairness of picking dates and what organizations can be involved or not, as well as the high expense or high risk with the insurance cost and that high risk of not knowing with if the weather is going to be poor or not, and that for groups to contain their sustainability in their organization, and also the public safety factor with parking, vehicles, food and beverage safety as well. So those issues have come about as this beer garden or these beer garden events have continued. And the main goal originally with the beer garden events was to have it as a fundraising opportunity and to really give back into the community. And that still is the goal today with this beer garden operational plan, is to provide a fundraising opportunity for community organizations and really put back into the community and for it to be carried out that way into the future. So over the last 6 months, our department has been looking in closer to evaluate those current issues and trying to figure out a way that we can restructure that to address all of that. And we met with city staff, with all the organizations that are a part of this, or as well as the organizations that would like to be a part of this event series, as well as met with a lot of different beer garden organizers throughout the state of Wisconsin to really see how their operations are carried through and to get some insight on how we could potentially use how successful they are as well. And then the public health department, other city staff, insurance companies, and the city attorney as well, just to try to get the best plan forward, moving forward for the beer gardens. And really, we got to sit down with every organization that's been a part of this and organizations that would like to be a part of this. And a lot of those organizations are on board and would like to be a part of this and at least try it out for a year and see see what we could do with it. So 13 of those 15 organizations that have been part of it in 2019, 2018, as well as a handful of other organizations that would like to be a part of it, are really have a positive response to this beer garden operational plan. And so this is what is brought forward, and I'd like to open it up for any questions that you guys might have.
Can I go first?
Yeah, certainly.
I did talk to someone who they had this 2 years ago, and again, I understand why you're doing this. He said they had to cut Park and Rec, or so, a check because they lost money. So I understand why they're going to do this. I would personally, my view, I'd like to see the organization that's running it have a little bit of a leeway and maybe get so much to begin with as a reward and of what they made that day, and then do your split after that. That's just my view. But I also realize why we're doing it is because of event permitting, insurances. Events are the biggest pain that we have. Would you agree with that, Susan, that event permitting is really difficult to monitor and people get everything in on time and done correctly? Yeah, so, okay, with that, I'll open it up to anybody else on the council.
Sure, yeah, I guess.
Alderman Sigwart?
Yeah, it's my understanding, Kylie, that the this will be the Friends of Park Rec.
Yes, that would be correct. Is that I guess I didn't go into detail of it, the entire operational plan there. I know you guys all have a picture of it, but it would be the Friends of Park and Rec Beer Garden. So that's how it would be titled and carried out, and they would essentially partner with the city and as well as all the organizations. So it would be a partnership.
Okay, so why don't we stop right there for a minute? Yep. Okay. Friends of Park and Rec is a 501c3 nonprofit.
Correct.
Okay. And they would actually purchase the insurance.
They would purchase annual insurance to cover the entire event series, which it would be one event series. And yes, they would cover the insurance, the event permitting, all the administrative duties throughout this event.
Okay. Then I'm going to direct my second question to Eric. Eric?
He's in consultation right now.
Eric, second question has to do with insurance. And that question is, the Friends of Park Rec purchase insurance for liability, I'm presuming, right? Okay. What liability does the city have when a nonprofit holds an event, purchases insurance, and then partners with another group? Since I don't understand insurance very well, I need a little clarification on that.
Well, that's an excellent question, Alderman Sigwart. I have some questions about that too, as it's being proposed. It's my understanding that Tony Matera, the city's insurance consultant, has indicated he can obtain liability insurance that would insure the Friends of Parks and Rec group for the conducting of these events, and that either would or would probably extend coverage to the members of the civic organizations who staff the event, who sell the beer, et cetera. So, you know, there is, frankly, to my mild surprise, that kind of coverage that can be written. But as I studied the proposal prior to tonight's meeting, I'm a little unclear because it seems Park and Rec will be designated the organizer of the event, that the Friends of Park and Rec is the sponsor of the event, and that the civic organizations provide the manpower to staff the event. And so to answer your question, I'm not sure if the city's Park and Recreation Department comes on board as the organizer. I would like to make very sure that the city's liability insurance also covers any potential city liability arising from one of these beer garden events, because I can assure you of one thing. heaven forbid someone's injured or property is damaged, any plaintiff's attorney worth his or her salt is going to sue everybody. And so it's a bad time to figure out that one of those, the organizer, the sponsor, or the civic group running the event, had no or inadequate coverage. So I think that point alone deserves further review.
Well, let me explain it from Kiwanis' standpoint, Eric. Okay?
Yep.
As an international organization.
Yes.
If we sponsor an event, which during Fish Day, we sponsored our stand. Unlike Lions, we weren't able to go out and go up North Wisconsin Street and sell fish because we were licensed for our insurance only for our stand. In the case if either the Friends or Park Rec are the sponsors of the event, our insurance doesn't cover the Kiwanians working there. We have to be the sole sponsor of our, so when we do a beer garden, we have coverage for liability and liquor coverage, okay, or beer, but only if we sponsor it. So our insurance isn't going to cover us as volunteers for Kiwanis. They would be volunteers for Park Rec or for the Friends. So it could be anybody, right? Just so what happens is we lose, in my opinion, we lose the identity of the sponsoring group. That's a concern.
Yeah, I can't speak to the coverage of your member organization. They're all different. And that's why we learned in this past year that some civic organizations paid nothing for alcohol, beverage, liquor liability coverage for an event of this type. And others pay, significant insurance premiums. That's just the difference in companies, the difference in underwriters, et cetera. I understand what you're saying, but it's my understanding, Alderman Sigwart, that Tony Matera has come up with some type of coverage that would extend to the members of your group, even though you may not have coverage under your organization's blanket liability policy. You may be covered by providing the staff to run the event itself under this other coverage that covers the Friends of Park and Rec. At least that's my understanding.
Last question, which is similar to my first question. Will the city of Port Washington have insurance coverage at the same time?
That's a question I haven't obtained the answer to, but of course we need to. As an organizer under our current event ordinance, if the city's the organizer, they have to provide insurance. A sponsoring organization, as distinguished from an organizer of the event, may pay for insurance, which I understand is what's being proposed here. But my job is to protect the interests of the city and its citizens, in this case, from liability claims. So yes, I'm going to need to verify under the proposal that the city's general liability insurance coverage also extends to being an organizer of these events. Even if the Friends of Park and Rec has their coverage, and that as well extends to what I call the manpower, the people staffing the event, that's great. But I want to make sure in the first instance the city's coverage is in place.
Thank you, Mr. Everhart. We're going to go right down the line then. How's that? Do you have any questions, Alderman Turney? Oh, sure. Alderman Plaitner?
First question I have is, how was that 50% revenue sharing determined, Kylie? I guess I never asked you that question.
That was determined based off of kind of some other operations that have been exampled in the state of Wisconsin. So some other event operations and that. So that's how that number came up. And then also just kind of, yeah, I guess that's how we had determined the 50% sharing and to try to make it as equal and fair as possible throughout.
Sure. I think I'd certainly like to revisit what that percentage would be, whether it's 25, 75, or 35, whatever it happens to be. I think that's something we should probably discuss tonight, if not at the next meeting or in the future. The second point I would be concerned about is, can the Friends of Park and Rec, and I guess I would talk to Mr. Myers there in the back, can the Friends group guarantee that there will be enough staff and adequate support from the Friends group to put on successful events each and every Saturday from July through October? That's a concern that I have, so I bring that out to the room here, not necessarily looking for an answer, but that's a concern that I have as well. The last point I guess I would make is that it does seem to me that 2021 is going to be another pandemic year. So I guess I would be in support, in generality rather than specifics of this plan, that we take another trial year to implement this plan, at least for 2021. And if it is successful, if things are good, then we can revisit it again for 2022. But I guess I would like to give this plan a chance. Again, with having some further discussions, maybe the breakdown of revenue sharing, et cetera. But it does seem to me that this is going to be another weird year. So I don't know what the best options are. So I guess those are my main points. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Benning?
So I guess first and foremost, Kylie, thank you for addressing this issue. I mean, we've sat here and for the last 3 years that I've been on here, heard about some of the issues, both from the city standpoint. Last year it was really exasperated when city attorney and city clerk were here on the 4th of July, whatever that Saturday was, trying to get licensing and insurance worked out for a beer garden that was happening that afternoon. So thank you for addressing that. Very thorough on your write-up of what the issues were. I'm appreciative that you talked to a lot of people, because I know you've been doing this since kind of the end of the beer garden last year. And it's not an easy problem to solve, because there's a lot of factors, and the legal and the insurance ones are probably the most complicated in this whole scenario. I think that we need to try some things that are different, because for those that were putting on the events, the amount of work that had to be done in the background, because we were getting incomplete applications with missing information, and staff was chasing and chasing and chasing. That's really what drove a lot of this, to get this much more structured in a disciplined manner. Again, I question the split, what's the right number. I know that we don't have the financials from all the groups to know what you made or didn't make in the years past, and so how we came up with 50%, I don't know. I don't know what's right and fair on this type of thing. But I do know that if we are going to continue to have beer gardens, something's got to change. They've got to be more consistent, more structured. And that may mean that there's less flexibility in what kind of beer we choose or things like that. But I do believe that, Kylie, what you guys have talked about is working with folks and what type of beer or what kind of bands and things like that, and partnering with them. It just would be a contract with Friends of Park and Rec. So I again applaud you for the diligence you put into trying to accommodate and address this, and we absolutely need to do something different. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Alderman Benning. Alderman Gasper, who was on Park and Rec.
Yeah, I've discussed a lot of this with Kylie before. I guess the insurance issue to me seems like potentially a showstopper that we need to have resolved before we want to approve this. So I guess the question is to Eric, if we would delay taking any action on this for 2 weeks until next meeting, can you have a thorough enough analysis for us by then?
On the insurance question, yes.
Yes.
I'm confident that I have some other legal comments when all of you have shared your ideas.
Okay, yeah, because as another Kiwanian on the Common Council, for us, insurance-wise, we're one of the groups that luckily did not have a problem with the coverage. But generally, whenever we do an event, we would typically pick up insurance anyway, except in cases where, like if somebody else is running the event, then we can't get it. So we'd almost want them to be covered as also insured, just in case something horrible did happen and so everyone started getting sued. So that's as a member of Kiwanis, that's my concern there. But yeah, another one of those questions that I'd like to see answered before we actually move forward on it. Otherwise, I think it's definitely worth trying, at least for a year. I'm not sure that when you get late in the year, if you're going to see that like October dates probably are not worth keeping from year to year, because I think those are the ones that are really hard pressed to make money. But yeah, I'd be willing to see this go for a year.
Thank you, Alderman Gasper. Alderman Newmeyer.
Same concerns my fellow alderman has here regarding the insurance. I don't see moving ahead with this till we have an answer from the city attorney. I agree we need to reorganize this, but I'm a little leery of how the revenue is being shared. I don't know what the incentive is for groups to go forward. So that might need to be tweaked a little bit. I don't know if we try this year on the one. I don't agree with it as it is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Newmeyer. Alderwoman Postel.
Thank you. I certainly understand the interest in the individuality of each beer garden. That puts the fun into it. It definitely helps with the advertising, with being completely engaged in the community. However, I agree with some of the comments. I think 2021 is going to be just as challenging as 2020 was. I think, too, the event application process has been extremely time-consuming. I was on the committee to help streamline that process. I know Kylie has worked very hard to help streamline the process. And when all is said and done, I really think we need to try something to make it easier for everybody and work through the challenges of this year. Then readdress it again at the end of this year or early next year to see if something else needs to be done. But thank you very much, Kylie, for all the work that you put into this.
Thanks, Deb. And I'd like to apologize to Alderman Tierney and to the citizen support. Every once in a while I do this, like I'll write down the line, and I can understand why you might not be prepared, but the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. I'd like to, again, I'd like to thank Kylie for putting this all together. I do think that maybe the split is something we have to look at, and I don't know how you approach this type of thing, but if you have one organization that turns out a whole lot of volunteers and, is basically capable of running it themselves, that might be a little different than a group that is, really has to almost partner with Park and Rec, the Friends of Park and Rec, I mean. I think that it is important from a marketing standpoint, as Alder Postel mentioned, that sometimes, I'll go to some of these, I'll make an effort to go to some of these things if it's an organization that I have a feel for, that it's something that I really support. So I think it's important to have the names of these organizations up there up front, particularly if they're, I think once or twice there have been somebody who've had signs up there that said, our organization, we're going to use our money for this particular project or something like that. So I think that's a real opportunity for those groups, and it's something that we don't want to take away from them. But I do agree with the general consensus that we need to do something, and that, but I think it's probably something we don't want to vote on tonight. We want to give it a little more thought, and particularly on the insurance issue. And that's really all I have, Mayor.
Alderman, thank you. Alderman Pladner had his hand up first, John.
Sorry, really quick too. I guess in addition to be investigating that 50-50 split in favor of giving more to the individual organizations, maybe we could identify a number, a dollar amount that would be given to the Friends group, and everything above and beyond that dollar amount would be split evenly across the groups that hold events. If there's 15 dates and we gross about $40,000 over the course of those 15 dates, if the thanks, Dave. Sorry. So whatever that number happens to be, sorry, I use it theoretically. So fine. If the 15 beer gardens gross $20,000, fine. 5,000 of that could be given to the Friends group. The other 15 could be split. I mean, something to that effect. We set a cap amount for the Friends group to receive. Everything above that cap would be split amongst the groups. Maybe it's something to that nature too. Just food for thought.
Thank you. Alderman Sigurd.
Yeah, to address Alderman Pleitner's question about labor, whether or not there be adequate labor. Let me ask this question first, Kylie. The Friends are obligated to make a payment to the city for each beer garden, right?
Yeah, it's to cover the event permit, event permitting process.
$500 if I remember right?
Yep.
Okay.
It's all one, yep.
Let's just take Kiwanis on August 29th. If Kiwanis doesn't provide labor for the event isn't held? Or is that decision made by Park Rec, or is it made by, who makes it?
It would be the Friends of Park and Rec that would determine that, but there would be other preventative measures taken and put in place for that specific situation. It's been discussed at that level to kind of figure out what would be done if an agreement wasn't upheld from that participating organization.
So in effect, we would have the Kiwanis would have a contract with the Friends.
Or
that says we're going to
agreement.
provide 15 volunteers.
Or whatever that number might be of volunteers for the day that they would uphold that. That would be kind of the next step in this is just, are you wanting to participate? If you are, then an agreement would be made that I want to, as the Kiwanis, participate and have 15 volunteers for that date, and a schedule would be made across the board by the Friends of Park and Rec. So they would provide tools for you to successfully gather all those volunteer positions.
I think I understand, but my question is, let's say that we can't get any volunteers. What happens?
Then it would be on the Friends of Park and Rec to provide volunteers for that day.
And if they couldn't, they'd still have to pay the city $500 for the day. There's a risk taken by the Friends. I want everybody to understand that they're taking a risk because this has been successful. If it rains every weekend, it's not successful.
Yep.
Okay, but this is a big change. I'd like to have us think a little more about it. I really like the idea, but I think it's got some inherent complications that we've got to work out.
Okay, and we're going to hear from the city attorney now. Maybe those complications will be solved. I'm giving you credit.
Sorry. So there are several legal issues I'd like to put in play. You needn't respond unless you want to, ask questions if you wish. But I think since it sounds like this matter may be coming back in 2 weeks with an answer to that insurance question, I'm obliged to point these matters out as well. If this proposed new policy is implemented, then you should all know that it will require further action. One thing that'll have to be done is to amend the existing event ordinance that was passed about a year ago to define the Friends of Park and Rec as the sponsor of these beer garden events, and to designate the city as the organizer of these events, which isn't too dissimilar. It's my understanding that what the city of Cedarburg does with its festivals, you have to go through this umbrella entity or organization, which I think is called Cedarburg Festivals, Inc., or something very close to that. But that'll require an ordinance amendment. Also, we'll have to amend the provisions of the event manual that was implemented also about a year ago, and as to which alderpersons Postel and Benning were in the vanguard. If they're okay changing that substantially in favor of this new proposal, that's fine with me. I'm just a piano player. So I'm telling you that too those provisions would have to be revisited to reflect this new proposal. I would add, so everyone is very, very mindful of this, and I know the city clerk is, that if you have a Friends of Park and Rec or a Park and Rec board representative who is responsible for overseeing the events, and I made this point with Kylie in an earlier meeting, everyone needs to know that that person has to be physically present at all times during the event and actively supervising it. They can't be somewhere else and available by phone. They can't be at home cutting the grass. And the reason is they will be designated as the alcohol beverage agent under the alcohol beverage license, and they will be held legally responsible even though the people staffing the event are from some unrelated civic organization. So that is a significant responsibility that everyone should be aware of and go into with their eyes fully open. I will deviate from my lane of travel also to get all of you thinking about this, because I think this is a significant policy issue, and if you decide to go ahead with this proposal, then I think you will have answered this a certain way. But I think the larger policy issue, or one of them from a legal perspective, is this. What about the civic groups, a couple of whom we've heard from the representatives tonight, the B3 and I think Stars and Stripes was the other. What about groups like that who say, or at least my understanding of their remarks were, they oppose this new proposal, they would like to do this themselves and keep 100% of the profits, thank you very much. You know, must they go through the Friends of Park and Rec organization? Legally, you can do that. You can make that organization in charge of that subset of the city parks, which is the beer garden venue. You can do that. The question is whether you want to do that as a matter of policy. And that's for all of you to determine. If you allow some groups to go through the Friends group and other civic groups to go it alone, then how are you going to, dole out dates? I've seen a proposal for a lottery system that seems fair. But again, you need to give that some further thought. So I appreciate your attention to all those things, and I will get back to you if that's what you direct me to do next time with an answer to the musical liability insurance question. Would the city of Port Washington also be covered under its current liability coverage if it is the organizer of these events going forward?
Thank you, Mr. Everhart.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to recognize quickly Justin Myers and their Friends of the Park and Rec Group, if you wouldn't mind coming up here. Justin, is there anything you'd like to provide on behalf of the Friends Group?
Well, I just want to say thanks for allowing us and Wendy as well to be part of this, and David and others. We did consider every option. I mean, everything that you're bringing about right now, we get touch base, we've talked about. I know one of the big discussions, that's how we told that, we can talk about that, at a later date. I'm certainly we'll go a little more in depth, but I just want to let everybody know, one of the biggest concerns I think that I don't want to say that we had, but one of the biggest concerns, if a group did not show up, that's where there would be a gap of about 2 weeks ahead of time. So we would have that.
Could you use the microphone over? Kylie, just have to move over. We're off a little bit of a tangent, but.
Sorry, hi, Justin Myers. I just want to say thank you, everyone here. What I was just addressing here was that, if there was a time where an organization would not be able to show up, I mean, we would know in advance if they are going to be able to commit to that day. And so that's what we would do, is aggressively work on those backup plans. I can tell you I'm the board president for the Port Washington Soccer Club. We make $0 when we do this, because we have volunteers and we pay out the volunteer fee. So we're one of those groups, like many others, that would definitely benefit from this. So I guess I just want to say thanks again for all your attention to this and all your assistance and everything Kylie's done as well. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Nope. Deb, do you have a comment or no? Okay.
I
Go ahead.
move to postpone action on this until the February 17th meeting, at which time the city attorney can update us on the insurance and other legal issues.
That's just what I was going to ask for. So we have the motion to postpone till the 17th.
Second.
Alderman Tierney is the second. Any further discussion? Again, all in favor say aye and raise your hands.
Aye.
That looks like it's unanimous, Susan. Thank you. So 17th. If it's okay, we'll go back into the regular agenda. So finance and licensing?
Sure, I can take this first one. We're talking about consideration of possible action on the revising the memorandum template for city council's board, committees, and commissions. Over the past several months, there's been some gaps and some missing information and some really key and critical actions that the county boards and commissions have taken. And it's the intent of this memorandum form adjustment and modification to provide additional information, budgetary impacts, next steps, public outreach, more and more information and clarification about what that individual body is discussing. So obviously you've read through it in your packet, but really I think it's just about providing more information so that the body that's taking up that action is more informed, can ask better questions, has a full knowledge of the ramifications of that motion, as well as, again, from the Finance and License Committee, what this will have an impact on the budget. Has this money been planned for or put in the capital plan? So really just about more information and making us better at our jobs. So with that, I would move to approve, unless there's some discussion.
I'll second that.
Nope, Alderwoman Postle. Okay, can we have the discussion now? And again, thanks to our city administrator, Tony Brown, for his hard work on this. And Deb. Is it yours? So, any discussion? Pat, you have a?
I just, I liked it a lot. There were some things that were added to it. I like the idea that we're going to have know more about what public input has been sought and that kind of thing. I just wanted to say again, thanks, Tony. It was, I think it's going to be a nice improvement.
I have a question, Tony. For a template, can we, because police and fire is optional and the library board is different, can we use this for them?
So my intention is to tell all staff members that no matter the board, commission, or committee, that this is the preferred template to use. There's been, as Alderman Pleitner's noted a number of times, that there was a lack of information. Sometimes I think you go before another board, committee, or commission, and you don't recognize the need to provide a recommendation. And one of the things we talked about at Finance License was how kind of the intent of creating this tool, or one of many, is to assist these bodies in guiding their discussion and to hopefully stay focused on the topic so that they're able to make an informed decision. And I think that that's really kind of one of the overriding intents with this memo, is to provide that structure so that's able to be done in a more efficient manner.
Right. And to add on to what City Administrator said, I think it's to provide the structure, but I've sat in some committee meetings where some topics were brought up. They didn't use this memo format or any memo format, and the committee really floundered, wandered all over the place, off topic and things like that. And I look to, our staff to provide us with guidance and recommendations, and that's really what this encourages. It doesn't make the decision for us, but it gives us an awful lot of information to make a educated decision over it. I will also add, I've given some feedback to the city administrator that, my technical writing teacher years ago said, write this for a 6th grade level, which when you do that, you take out all the terms that, can tend to be technical, and acronyms get defined and things like that, because I think it's important for us to be able to understand this, but as much or more important to our citizens to be able to understand what's being proposed, to be able to come to this session and give feedback on what's being proposed. Thanks.
And again, what the city administrator brings is structure and organization, so he's very good at that. Thank you, Tony. No, we do have a motion and a second. All in favor, again, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. All opposed? Unanimous again, Susan? Go ahead,
Great.
Jonathan.
So, speaking of which, in terms of structure and organization from the city administrator, the next on the agenda is to approve a new purchasing policy. So right now, there is no discernible and clear-cut way in which we make purchases at the city level. This purchasing policy allows us to do that. So in your memo, there is a breakdown of how purchases would be made across the city, everything from less than $10,000, between $10,001 to $50,000, and above $50,000 would come to the Common Council for final approval. But it really walks through and defines at the staff level, at the department level, and then up to the Common Council level and the city administrator, who would be responsible for approving these purchases. So I think it goes a long way in defining what goes where in terms of approving for different types of projects that are ongoing in the city, as well as where this money is coming from, bidding out for individual projects and purchases, as well as emergency situations. So that's a brief outline. I guess, Tony, if you'd want to clearly define it even more.
Sure. I'm not going to go through it in any extensive detail, but I would hit on maybe some broader notes for consideration and just clarification to make sure everyone's aware of it. The first is the purchasing thresholds. There is two separate set of criteria. One's for goods, services, materials, and such. And then the second is for professional consulting services. Generally speaking, for each, the dollar threshold for any of those items is the following. Up to $10,000 would be at the department's discretion. Above $10,000 to $50,000, it would get elevated to the city administrator position for approval. And then anything after $50,000 would come to the Common Council for approval. The exception to that really is public construction. That comes to the council no matter what. Probably the second important thing here is the section that's titled Encumbrance of Funds. This really deals with budgetary allocations and how that impacts a project being approved. If there is not a budget allocation that's sufficient to cover the cost of the project, then a department director really has two options. The first is to identify other budget funds that can be transferred to accumulate the necessary amount. Otherwise, the other alternative is for that employee to work with the finance director and or myself on establishing a funding plan for Common Council consideration. Probably the last thing I would end with is that there are two slight modifications. The first is dealing with, hold on one second, department head responsibilities under 4B. The sentence that talks about considering factors for determining a vendor, there was just a little more clarification put on that sentence or two. And then the second thing is related to the diagrams for the different purchasing thresholds. Alderman Benning had brought up something that I thought bared more conversation, and we talked about it. And originally what we had discussed was at the title putting, I think it was something to the effect of authorization levels or something to that point, to really get across the point of this diagram is about who authorizes the purchases at what dollar value. But then as we talked more, I think from a user perspective, it probably makes more sense to X off all the people that are involved. So for instance, if it's 10,000 to 50,000, there would be a check next to department and city administrator. And then for another example, 50,000 and over would be department, city administrator, and Common Council, to the point that as you progressively go up in dollar value, the necessary people who have to be involved with the process kind of escalates. So with those two revisions, I would recommend approval. So the motion would be, I move to approve the purchasing policy as presented.
I'll move to approve.
Alderman Plaitner's motion, second.
I'll second.
Alderwoman Postle. Any further discussions or questions?
Sure.
Alderman Gasper?
First, I assume that the city attorney has verified that everything in here is within the bounds of, and requirements of state law as far as the thresholds?
I did review and revise and comment on the proposed purchasing policy. Really, the only state law that speaks to thresholds is the one on public construction. And yes, that's all correct.
Okay. The other one, looking at the professional consulting services at over $50,000, competitive bid requirement. As someone who works in consulting, most consultants really like quals-based over bid-based. I'm not convinced that you necessarily get a better price on bid-based versus going with the qualifications-based either. And the other question I'd have is, in the case of when you have a consultant, you often will see, and we've seen this with various projects, where we have a consultant hired for cheap, and either through scope creep or through continual amendments, the project keeps inflating over that. I didn't see it here, I might have missed it. Do we have anything that at some level for, as say a contract keeps getting amended or grows, it kicks back and would require it to be re-advertised? Or basically, if you go and have say a consulting contract that's $49,000 and then creeps over, it avoids having to be bid?
That's a very good question. I would say if once it hits the threshold where it's over a dollar value, so let's say 50,000, I would say that it would come to the council. Now there is a note in here about the project has to be combined as a total. So that would include consulting work along with any other necessary equipment, goods, or otherwise that needs to be purchased. So that would be something that, those are questions that I would ask along the way. So probably from a management control standpoint, I think how it would be handled is once we get to the point where it's over between $25,000 and $50,000, that's where we have a longer discussion about the project scope and if it's going to get to a point where there potentially could be mission creep. But some of that, I think you would probably recognize this as well, is some of that's unforeseen. So it's probably going to happen regardless. It's just a matter of what are the necessary approvals. And I would say at that point, it would be, again, if it comes to a point where the dollar value is over that 50,000 mark, that it comes to the Common Council for authorization.
Okay, just for an example, DOT typically operates things that if a contract hits the point that it's doubled from its original value, it has to go back for a whole additional level of approvals, like you're starting fresh on it. But I think too, I don't think we should want to constrain ourselves to a competitive bid on things. I think because there's some things we're going to seek out consultants for that are easily going to be over $50,000 that we're going to want to be qualifications based because it's specialty or something. So I think we should have some flexibility built in there to make that decision.
If you want, I can certainly add that in there and bring the item back, or just give me the authority to add it in there, working with the city engineer as an example and the city attorney, since they interact with contracts like this quite frequently. The other thing I'd probably add is there is a section that allows the council to waive by resolution the competitive bidding process.
Okay.
Now that would probably somewhat slow down the progress of projects and might create timeline issues. But there is that option contained within here.
Okay, Mike? So with that being said, we do have a motion and a second. Did you have to amend it to include what Tony just did, or? That was Alderman Plaitner and Alderwoman Postle.
I'm okay with amending the motion to reflect what Alderman Gasper just summarized.
And I will second that amended motion.
Okay. All right, then with that, again, all in favor, say aye and raise your hands.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous again, Susan, thank you. And the last
next-
item, please.
Yep, review and possible action on navigating safer from home to your home port plan. I guess I'd gonna refer to the city administrator if you don't mind, Tony.
Hold on one second and let me scroll down to that item.
You can have all my paperwork.
Oh, here, let me do this.
Here.
No, thank you.
Fine.
So we already talked about beer gardens, so that somewhat plays into the larger discussion that we'll have on this item. As the weather gets warmer and event season approaches, I think it is probably incumbent on us to have a discussion about what to do with regard to what I'll break out as kind of a couple different categories. And I preface all this by saying that in June of last year, we adopted a plan and it dealt with these categories as well. The first is operations. The second is special events. And then the third is really programming. So when that comes into play, it's really the library, senior center, and Parks and Rec. I think that it's pretty clear and it's probably very definitive as far as asking anyone that the vaccine rollout nationwide hasn't gone as hoped for. That the pandemic is clearly still an issue that is not going away anytime soon, which would likely include well into spring, summer, and I don't know, possibly fall. Having said all that, what we're looking at as an approach for consideration this evening is utilizing the Washington Ozaukee County Health Department's risk status indicators, which are burden, trajectory, and case status, and determining at what level those are. And that really is the input to looking at the health department's capacity recommendations as far as how many people should be recommended at a particular type of event. But then allowing staff to make a determination about and flexibility to identify what mitigation strategies are necessary based on the unique circumstances of a given event or programming. So for instance, things like the size of the area, if it's indoor, if it's outdoor, those are all considerations to determining, I think, capacity as well. And I guess I'd end before kind of getting into more of a discussion about it's seemingly becoming more complicated for municipalities, at least in the state of Wisconsin, to determine what to do for some of these events and programming. And I think that's kind of driven by some of the ongoing litigation, but also with the legislator now possibly repealing the mask mandate. So one of the things we talked about at the committee level was there may be a scenario in which the state-wide mask mandate is repealed, and the city may want to consider a local mask mandate. Now, I will freely admit that that clearly contradicts kind of what I'm saying, which in no uncertain words is why don't we allow people, well, allow the city and people to have events and let them make the determination of whether or not they want to attend, but making sure that the environment that they're able to do that is as safe as possible. Again, utilizing mitigation strategies. But if for anything else, I think a local mask mandate may have some merits in indicating kind of the expectations that we'd like to see for people in the community. Now, last year, this past summer, enforcement was certainly something that was to be desired. But I think there was a community preference to have special events as well. So with all that said, again, operations-wise, nothing largely would change. We'd continue what's in the existing plan for special events and programming for the three departments I mentioned. It would be based on kind of county recommendations, but then being informed by professionals like Mr. Carson and Kylie as well about how those particular things are handled. So happy to answer any questions. Tom and Kylie are here maybe to talk about programming if you have specific questions about that as well. So please.
Any of the alders have any questions?
Well, not so much a question, but, you know, kind of some comments which will eventually lead to a motion. But I think, you know, city administrator touched on it. The first thing is operations, and we don't see that changing. And that's really how we do business within our facilities, within our vehicles, and things like that. So that would stay consistent. The second one is, and I may have these in a little bit different order, is how we do programming between Park and Rec, between the library, and between the senior center. And where I'm going to go with this is that, again, what city administrator says, we rely on the expertise and guidance for doing things safely in each of the areas from our leaders in those areas. And then thirdly, which gets to, you know, public events hosted in our city, in our public areas, whether it's the streets or the parks or things like that, that we would open those things up and allow those to occur. Though what we've talked about is that trying to address a couple issues from last year, but also to add to our event process is that we would add a document, pretty much what comes from the DHS, that, you know, here's the best practices or guidelines for doing an event in the public space in a safe manner. Again, expectation of mask wearing, expectation of social distancing, expectation of hand washing, and those kind of things. The other piece of this that I think is very important is that any event permits need to be completed and turned in completed with all documentation, with all the requirements met 60 days before the event. And so that means that people requesting to start an event really need to start at 120 or 90 days before the event to have their insurance certificate in place, to have all their documentation, their plan in place, a minimum of 60 days. Now, within that 60 days between when they submit the completed stuff and when the event, we may review it here in council in a shorter time frame just because of the timing of meetings and things like that. But, you know, it's not that we are still reviewing stuff at 2 weeks before the event. It's completely reviewed and signed off 60 days before the event, so we can ensure that there is a good operational plan for the event, that all of the right resources from you know, police to fire to whoever is in place to support it. So that was our discussion earlier, and where I would go with a motion at some point.
Thank you, Alderman Menning.
I mean,
And if we're ready, I'll make that
well,
motion.
I
but-
think I have a comment, but also Alderman Turney has one.
I was just going to ask if Kylie or Tom, I don't know if either of you could just take a minute and address any changes that you would see coming in the future. I mean, I think, Tom, I know from what you've talked at the library board that you're going to be somewhat flexible, but you don't see major changes at this point. And I didn't know,
Tom,
Kylie, I was
can you come up to the
thinking
mic?
the swimming pool and some things like that, so.
At this time, we're still following the CDC recommendations, and we get a lot of support from Department of Library Development. And, you know, there's still, right now, there's still a lot of libraries that are not offering services from inside the library. They're still closed. They just offer curbside services. Now, we just had there was just a meeting this morning to talk about programming between the library and Park and Rec. And the goal really is most of the programs will be outside. Social distancing, we will encourage people to use masks. And if it's raining, we'll have to cancel, more than likely. We are planning that we will be able to have programs in our building by June. Now, I have to tell you, after seeing the latest, it's probably not going to happen, just because of those variants that are happening. So we're doing the best we can. Fortunately, people have been following the mask rules. We did have to call the police on someone last week, but it was not because they're not wearing the mask. It's because of the way he treated the staff members. So we're trying to do our best and be positive about it, but we're ready to go virtual. All the programs we have picked for our summer reading program, they will go virtual for us with no additional cost. So we're just we really do take it day by day.
Thanks, Tom.
Sure, you're welcome.
I would second Dan's motion, Alderman Benning's motion. Unless Kylie, unless there's anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, then we'll just start with the motion.
Yeah, and Kylie, let's make this clear on what the plan is for the pool, since that was a big issue last year.
Oh, okay. So just echoing of what Tom had said here is we're using current research, current information, just leaders in our Wisconsin Park and Rec Association in that to try to make educated decisions, but really trying to make a plan for we will be making a plan, health and safety plan for every program that we offer and every facility that is open, including our office, including the pool, including our parks. So having those plans in place are going to be important to have, just to show the public exactly what health and safety mitigations that we're taking. But we're planning on running more programming outdoors. We did run a lot of successful programming last year. We did have our summer park program and our cheerleading and several other programs that were actually the most successful that we've had with the numbers in those. So I think we can continue to use those health and safety plans that we devised last year and just expand on those for the other programs that we're looking to offer, and get back to as many that we can offer safely and financially beneficial for our department. So pool wise, I guess that might be more of the question, but that is something we're all working on as a state. Today we had a meeting with all of the operators in the state to kind of look at what we're all going to do, and I'm putting together a whole plan, so I don't have that all ready to show you guys today, but to safely open the pool, we will go through like every little piece of the puzzle for the pool operations and how we're mitigating that. We'll have to take a look at capacity level for sure and modify that. But I'd like to see that we open the pool, especially mechanically. We need to take a look at opening the pool for that factor, as well as just getting all of our staff and staffing back into our department and keeping them certified and trained. So I think there's a lot of reasons as to why we can open, and we just have to take those mitigations to make sure safety is the main priority, which it already is in our programming. We just have to do a little extra steps here. So I guess once I get the pool plan together, I can share that out with everybody. And if you guys have any feedback, you can definitely add to it, but it'll be a lengthy packet here. So kind of getting that ready for everyone.
But your intention, Kylie, is to have the pool open this summer.
Yep, my intent.
Again, operating in a much safer mode for the plan that you're putting together.
Yeah, opening the pool, but no special events. We wouldn't run any like pool movie or dollar swim days or anything like that. Sure. But we would operate and open swim with a limited capacity and just do various different things with staff training, and staff would all be required to wear masks unless they're actively guarding, and just like exits, entrances, how you have your trash receptacles and everything, how it's marked out for your facility. So a lot of work to do to get that open, and so just knowing now is important also, because supplies and that kind of thing is important to kind of get on to right now.
Thank you, Kylie. I think, there still will be masks and everything else this summer. Problem I see is as more and more people get vaccinations, they're going to think they don't have to wear a mask. Even after your second vaccination, you still need to wear a mask for 2 weeks. You're still only 94%, protected. There's still the other person, the 6%, you might be asymptomatic. So I do believe that people really need to wear the mask, wash their hands, do social distancing, even with the vaccine. Personally, my personal take on it. So.
To extend the conference for 15 minutes, press 1.
So did I hear a motion from Alderman Benning for this?
Second from Alderman Pleitner.
And Alderman Pleitner is a second. Any further discussion?
If we could pause for a second, can we maybe go over what the motion is again?
So the short version of it is that we continue with our operations as we have outlined in the document from June, that we open up our programs with best practice guidelines from individual leaders, and that we allow special event permits with the caveat that they must be completed with all information required 60 days prior to the event, and that will include documentation on best practices for holding a public event.
Do we want anything added?
And Susan, I can follow up with you tomorrow if we need to.
No, that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's okay with Alderman Pleitner? Okay, so again, all in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous again. Thank you. Getting lost here. I guess we're on 8B, public hearing to consider a conditional use grant to operate the automotive services and used car sales on the property located at 922 to 926 North Wisconsin Street. Mohammed Abdu and Pay for Auto Service. Bob, you want to discuss this first, and then the gentleman who I apologize, I don't know your name. Okay, you can come up again for the public hearing and then we can have a discussions. You want me to? Okay, I guess, the city attorney's gonna take it.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I spoke with the city planner prior to the meeting, and unfortunately, looking closely at the procedure leading up to this evening's hearing, the law requires that the notice of public hearing be a Class 2 notice, which means it has to be published twice for consecutive weeks in the local paper. And the last publication date cannot be less than 1 week before the public hearing. In this instance, the public notice was published once, not twice, and is insufficient. So looking ahead at the calendar and assuming that the notice can be republished as a Class 2 notice, I'm not sure it can get in the paper anymore this week. I would doubt that unless we prevail on Chris after the meeting to do a
very
favor,
nice
but
if
I won't do that.
could.
So assuming it could first be published on February 11th and then again consecutively 1 week apart, that's February 18th. That is a day after the next council meeting, so the matter, once the public hearing notice is published, would have to come on for public hearing at the first meeting in March, which I believe is March 2nd. And then the same action following the public hearing could be taken up at that time. So unfortunately, and these things happen, items B1 and 2 would have to be postponed. A motion to that effect would be appropriate so that the publication can be accomplished, followed by action. And with all due respect to anyone on the council or in attendance here this evening, I think it would not be wise to wade into the merits of this at this time.
Okay, so can we do both 1 and 2 and B at the same time?
I would do them separately.
Separately?
By separate motion to postpone to March 2nd, 2021 meeting.
Okay, that would be for the public hearing. Do I have a motion for that?
If I could.
Oops, okay.
Just a question for the city attorney. If we're not hypothetically able to get the first notice in the paper until, what would it be?
February 11th?
Yeah, that'll meet the requirements then?
Well, it would, the first insertion would be February 11th. The second consecutive week thereafter would be the 18th. And then there's more than a week, which would transpire between the 18th of February and March 2nd. So yes, it would comply with all the legal requirements for the public hearing notice.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Didn't you say at the last notice has to be less than a week before the meeting or more than a
It
week?
can't be less than 1 week
Okay,
before.
can't be less than 1 week. Okay.
So applying the relevant counting rules, I guess, as prescribed by statute, March 2nd. I'd hope we could get it in the paper yet tomorrow, but I really think that's over. From experience, I'm going to say that's a non-starter. Although, well, I'll ask. Chris, any thoughts on that? You don't know, yeah. It's the city clerk. Any thoughts on that? I know the paper does us lots of favors, but I don't know if the presses are running. Okay, I mean, the notice is, other than changing the dates, the notice is set to go. Then I think the motion would be restyled, so to speak, and the proper motion would be to postpone this matter indefinitely until the next available date that it can come on, consistent with the notice requirement. So that's either going to be February 17th or March 2nd.
One question prior to doing that. If it is run the 4th and the 11th, isn't it still less than 7 days to the actual meeting?
That's true, Bob. Good catch. It would be less than 7. So it's going to have to get bumped to the March 2nd. Thank you.
So
Yes, proper motion would be postponed to March 2nd.
Okay.
I move to postpone the public hearing until March 2nd.
Alderman Gasper, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Alderwoman Postle. All in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That is passed. I did not. You didn't oppose. There was no opposition, no. I saw 3 hands. It is difficult with the plexiglass.
Okay, and I move to postpone the review and possible action on the I'm getting
Conditional
my
use.
items mixed up. I move to postpone consideration and possible action on a conditional use grant until the March 2nd meeting.
Motion from Alderman Gasper. Do I have a second?
And I will second.
Alderwoman Postle. Again, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous on that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I, before we depart
Please.
from the subject, I have a question for the city planner. Is the applicant present here tonight? I don't think so.
Nope.
And I thought I read he wasn't at the plan commission meeting.
No, they were here originally, but when I informed them of the public hearing issue, they left. Yeah.
Is the applicant on the phone at this time?
No, they were under the impression since it was going to be tabled, they were no longer in the audience.
So you'll let the applicant know of the new date, correct?
Yeah, I've already spoken to them about that.
And in my experience, physical presence or participation in a meeting by an applicant is usually a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
They choose not to.
No, at the last plan commission meeting, that was not an issue. There was a miscommunication the first time. At the second plan commission, all parties were involved. Yeah. Yeah.
A general rule would be a good idea to participate. Thank you. Just an observation.
Okay. So I apologize to the citizens for that. Just a little technical error. I guess we're on unfinished business, review and possible action on resolution 2020-17, vacation and discontinuance of the portion of East Jackson Street right away from North Lake Street easterly to the termination of East Jackson Street, Newport Shores project. Hey, good to see you, Ian.
May I take that one, Mr.
Yes,
City
sir,
Administrator
please.
and Mayor? Thank you.
Please.
So you've seen this before. It's been brought on and deferred. Here we are to act on it tonight. The ordinance is a requirement of state law on the vacation of rights-of-way. If you approve that ordinance this evening, it will then be recorded in the Register of Deeds office. The only change to the form of the ordinance would be the dating line at the end. I think it says the blank day of January. We would obviously change that to February. The exhibit to that ordinance is not there, not attached, but it's Exhibit B to the next item, which is, and you may well recall it, it's the cross-hatched area showing the former or the current East Jackson Street right-of-way. So that's the area being referred to that would be vacated in its entirety from west to east and north to south. Those are my comments with respect to the, did I say ordinance? I meant resolution. Excuse me.
Questions, anybody?
Do we need a motion before discussion, or?
I'll do either way. I'll do a motion if you want. I think we have to get this done finally. So, looking for a motion,
Also move.
Alderman Sigwart. And a second, please.
Second.
Alderman Benning. Now discussion. Anybody? Alderman Sigwart.
I have a question for the city attorney. I'm mildly confused about the terminology vacation, where I'm looking for, vacation and discontinuance of. Okay, so we're vacating the right-of-way, which was dedicated for public street, and we're discontinuing the use of that as a public street. But there still will be an opportunity for that to be used by the public. Maybe you could explain that, Eric.
Yep. Well, the terms vacation and discontinuance are used interchangeably under Wisconsin law. I think they're different words, but I think practically and functionally they're the equivalent. And I think if there's a distinction, it doesn't have much difference in this instance. To your second question, yes, the public aspect of the city street would go away as soon as you pass the resolution vacating and discontinuing the right-of-way. But that's why the easement creates and preserves the right of public access over that same strip of land, half of which, once you vacate the city street, the northerly half of which would become property of the city and the southerly half of which would become property of the 324 Lake Street LLC. So take away its public nature and use and put in place an easement that preserves public rights of access over and across the former street right-of-way.
Got it.
Any other questions? Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. All opposed, unanimous again. Review and possible action regarding the proposed easement agreement relating to vacation of the portion of East Jackson Street, Newport Shores Development Project.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I participated in a online seminar, a webinar the other day, and the speaker asked this question at the outset. He said, how many of you, when you come to a seminar, like it when the speaker just speaks to you using his or her outline as a guide and doesn't read the outline to you? And about 90% of the respondents said, we like that. And he said, sorry, I'm going to read it to you. And he did. And I'm not going to quite do that and wear out my welcome with all of you. But I did send you a memo summarizing the pertinent terms of this easement agreement. And at the outset, I want to say that the terms and conditions of the easement agreement itself are controlling and what matters. My summary is a best effort, but if I misstate any term or condition of the agreement, it is nevertheless the agreement that is final and binding. The agreement that I sent you is last Friday is the one that you have before you this evening. I should note some housekeeping things. It's been reformatted a bit so to widen the margins. We've put in boldface typeset the references to the exhibits A, B, C, and D, and some of those matters. But the substance has not changed at all. And so if you'll indulge me, I'll go over my outline, not word for word, but I think the outline summary serves to highlight the important or key provisions. And I'm doing this as well for the benefit of anyone who's listening in or watching by television or otherwise, because of course they don't have the benefit of the agreement before them. So first things first, it's an easement agreement, and an easement isn't a word you hear just every day. It's a legal term, and it means the granting of a temporary or permanent interest in land that is possessed or owned by another person. It's not the right of ownership of the other person's land. They still own it, and by and large, they still possess it, but they grant, in this case, for your standpoint, they grant to the city and to the public certain rights of use of the land, to enter the land, to go across the land, and to use it for a specific purpose and in a specific way. The landowner who grants an easement can't thereafter interfere with your authorized use of the easement. The easement runs with the land, which is a legal term, which means that the rights of use follow any transfer or sale of the land in the future. And so it becomes a permanent feature or fixture of the land, but it is not ownership of the land itself. The parties to the agreement are two, the city and the developer entity, which is 324 Lake Street LLC. But significantly, the agreement doesn't just end with those two parties. I think the city's going to probably be around longer, but if 324 Lake Street LLC would ever dissolve or sell or transfer assign its rights to the land, this easement agreement would be binding on their successors and assigns as well. So there's different kinds of easements that this document grants, different categories. For some are temporary and some are perpetual, that is to say permanent. I'll talk about each in turn very quickly. There are 2 temporary easements, A and B, and they're both granted by the city to the developer entity, 324 Lake Street. And the purpose of temporary easement A is to allow the developer to do, frankly, what they're already doing, to have access to what will soon be what is now the former East Jackson Street right-of-way, to bring in their construction materials and equipment and to store them there during the time that the old Newport Shores is being demolished. I think that's all done, fair to say. And the new Newport Shores is being built on the site with all the various improvements. Temporary easement B, also granted by the city to the developer, is to, again, enter the former right-of-way, street right-of-way, to gain access to the city's lakefront parcel. There's a legal description of that little piece. That's that little part I always say where when my kids were little, we'd go down there and feed the ducks. It's not pretty to look at, but hopefully pursuant to the terms of the redevelopment agreement, when the developer builds a new terrace and walkway there, it will be significantly improved aesthetically and functionally. So that's the purpose of that second temporary easement B, so they can come and go onto the city's lakefront land for that purpose. Both easements terminate March 31st of 2022, which coincides with the substantial completion date for the entire project. And then we move on to talk about the permanent or perpetual non-exclusive easements. The non-exclusive part just frankly means what it says. It's not granted by the developer to the city or by the city to the developer for their exclusive use. There are others who can make use of these rights as well. So in the first case, the developer grants to the city and to the public, and I highlighted and underscored that, for pedestrian and vehicular access across the developer's half of the southerly half of the vacated East Jackson Street, to come and go, that is to say, to have access to the adjacent city properties and facilities. That's sort of a broad term, but it's meant to include, but without limiting it to, the city's water filtration plant, the pathway that runs basically north and south along the lake and leads to the yacht club and lower Lake Park, sometimes called Veterans Park. As you go north, of course, you get to the wastewater treatment plant and the North Beach beyond that, et cetera. But also to the U.S. breakwater structure and the lighthouse that the city owns at the end of the breakwater. And last but certainly not least, access to Lake Michigan for all of the uses and benefits and amenities that go with that. So I would say that's, if it's not the key provision from the perspective of the public, I don't know what is. The right of continued perpetual access across the former street right-of-way. And the next one is likewise a perpetual and non-exclusive easement, this time granted by the city to the developer. And it too allows for pedestrian and vehicular access across those portions of the city's property. This would be the north half of the former right-of-way, to have access to the adjacent city properties, as I've just described a few to you, and facilities, including the breakwater, the lighthouse, and Lake Michigan. There's a section of the easement agreement moving on by which the developer waives and releases any riparian rights it had or may have as a function or as a result of the East Jackson Street vacation. I guess I'm not going to state definitively whether there are or aren't any of those rights that would accompany the fact of the vacation of the right-of-way, but whether or not there are, they are waiving and releasing those. So, and that's a requirement, by the way, of the redevelopment agreement. Next, now that these easements are granted, so to speak, what use can be made of them? Easements are all about rights of use going forward. And so the easement agreement says that the developer shall, not may, but shall construct, maintain, repair, and remove snow from all 24 parking spaces and drive aisles. This is Exhibit D, the pretty one with the goldenrod and yellow coloration. which I think pretty vividly sets forth the areas that we're speaking about now within the former right-of-way. There's one little change, minor, but nevertheless a change from the draft of the easement agreement that I provided to you prior to the meeting. And with respect to the sidewalk, which abuts the parking spaces on the north side of the former East Jackson Street right-of-way, the developer does have the responsibility to construct that new sidewalk. And I think it's, I'm not sure, as I recall, 8 feet wide and 5 inches thick, the concrete itself. The city is responsible for removing the snow from that sidewalk. But there's a slight change. The developer wouldn't be required to maintain that sidewalk, but rather the developer and the city will share equally the cost of reconstructing the sidewalk if it needs that. And also that sort of parallels the parties' agreement to share equally the cost of the full depth restoration of the parking spaces and drive aisles when necessary. Short of full depth restoration, it is the responsibility of the developer to maintain the construct, maintain, and repair the parking spaces and drive aisles you see on Exhibit D. Next, the parties grant each other, again, perpetual, that is a permanent, non-exclusive, but reciprocal easements to each other and to the public for access to and use of all 24 of those parking spaces on the north side of the former East Jackson Street right-of-way and on the south side, and the drive aisles in between, as highlighted on Exhibit D. And the use is for public parking of motor vehicles at no charge. Further, there's a provision that is sort of self-evident, but nevertheless prohibits vehicles from being parked at any time in any way that would interfere with or block the easement access that I spoke about earlier, down to the east, down to the lakeshore. And some final lesser importance items, but included nevertheless. The utilities, notwithstanding the vacation of the East Jackson Street right-of-way, all easements and related rights, whether they belong to the city or any utility company that relate to under or overground utilities and facilities will continue unaffected by the vacation of the street right-of-way. And further, the city reserves the right permanently to place, use, install, maintain, replace, add, and expand any utilities as necessary in the future. I left out a little wrinkle there that Mr. McCain, who's present here tonight, is thinking of at this moment, which is subject to the city's obligation to restore the surface of the former street right-of-way after they make these utility maintenance or improvements. So that's in the agreement too. I told you the agreement next is binding on the successors and assigns of each party. What they meant is both the benefits of the easement, access, parking, et cetera, but also the burdens of the easement, because it subjects the city's half, north half of the right-of-way, and the developer's south half of the right-of-way to all of these requirements. All of those benefits and burdens pass to any subsequent owners, pardon me, of the land in question. However, and this is an important point, I think, for the Common Council to consider, the benefits granted by the easement agreement apply to the city properties and to the developer's property, but not to other properties. For example, and this really isn't in play, but just to illustrate my point, if there were other lands adjacent to the developer's land that the developer might acquire in the future, not this developer, but some developers might overreach and say, gee whiz, we have this access easement, you know, shouldn't it also apply to the new land we bought, you know, a couple doors down? And the answer is no. This is limited, the easement rights are limited to the use of 324 Lake Street, also known as Newport Shores, the new Newport Shores. And again, some housekeeping items. The agreement can only be amended in writing by mutual agreement of the parties. And finally, both parties not only agree, but are obligated to indemnify each other and to get insurance to cover claims that arise within the easement area for injuries or damages that might occur or arise with respect to their guests or other people coming into the easement area, unless unless the claims are based on the negligence of the other party. So that's it. I think that's a pretty fair summary of the important moving parts of the agreement. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, or if Mr. McCain wants to add or subtract from my remarks, I would invite him to do that.
I think Mr. McCain just wants an approval filing. Any comment? Alderman Benning?
So, a couple of questions, Rick. And I don't know if Rob is still on the phone. I wish he was if he's not. We've got breakwater construction coming back in the spring, and we're going to need access through this site for that work, both for the staging, and I think this is where I wish Rob was here, for the pumping of the concrete. Because my understanding was they were going to run a line out or something, but.
He is on the line.
Okay. But I guess I don't know what access we need, and should it be included in this, for us to be able to complete that breakwater work, both in the short term and then in the future. I want to make sure that we have access to the breakwater, because we have things like a ramp that still doesn't have railings, and some other maintenance work that we need to do out there, and need access from through this property.
Rob, did you hear Alderman Benning's initial question?
Yeah, I did hear all that. I
Okay.
guess I'd have to circle back with Ian and Michaels, but I'm confident we could certainly work side by side, because they've been right up against the shoreline. I don't think we'll be in the way of the Newport Shores construction, but I guess I'd have to touch base with Ian and Catalyst.
I just want to make sure we are protected, because we have a timeline on this, completing this construction, so.
It's a great point.
So, yeah, it is a fair point, for sure. Isn't it a matter of coordinating the efforts of the developer and their construction with the city's needs to, or its subcontractor to come and go? And
And independent of understanding schedule and full staging needs on a surface level, Alderman Benning, I think this is something obviously we'd be happy to accommodate. Certainly the right thing to do is to make sure this is coordinated. Now, to your point on if it's documented or not, that's obviously up to the body here, but I think this is something that's in everybody's interest to make sure it's coordinated. Now, to that end, I'd need Rob and team to meet with my contracting team to work out the fine details of it.
Okay. To me, it's a big thing. We've got a lot invested in it, and we can't afford to not have the ability to stage and things like that.
Sure, absolutely understood.
well, I guess to get all legal on you here, the right given under the easement agreement to get to the breakwater and the lighthouse are just pure rights of access. I suppose we could add, access and including but not limited to performance of maintenance on those structures. One works hand in hand with the other. Would that be reasonable?
I think that'd be reasonable. I really think this comes down to our superintendent meeting with Michael's superintendent and working something out. But yeah, that would be reasonable.
Are some of the breakwater repairs done from the wet side of the from the lakeside? I don't know. Does everything come down East Jackson Street, Rob, or does it come over water?
I know they were lifting the pontoons in for the barges.
Yeah, they've been doing right. They've been staging their barges, they've been staging their barges over at Coldock Park and bringing those over. So to be honest, I'm trying to remember if they're bringing the concrete over in batches or they were pumping it.
Yeah, it's more the putting the barges in the water and then taking them out when they're done, and that was done through, the old Newport parking lot.
Right. Well, that's true. Yep. They did launch there,
Yeah.
although they do have the option. I mean, we looked at various options. So, I mean, if we were absolutely had our hands tied and couldn't get through the parking lot, there are other other ways to get the barge in the water.
Well, so I was a little couched on my previous answer, Alderman, just because I wasn't fully clear of what scope we're talking about. But if it's as simple as that, that seems highly appropriate to add to this if you'd like. But yeah, it's in the interest of all of us
Yeah,
to
and
make
I
sure
mean-
that is coordinated and done properly this year.
Yeah, and the breakwater work is should be completed by the end of May. So, we'll be out of there before they do any parking lot construction, I'm sure.
It's more of a, not bumping into each other when you got a couple of cranes sitting there, so.
Well, I think just to be explicit, then I'll maybe follow up with you tomorrow, Mr. McCain, but it sounds like to insert a couple, 3 words about access and for purposes of maintenance of those structures.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
Yeah, okay. And then coordination is key, obviously, on this. Yeah. So, good point. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? So do we have a motion then with that little caveat?
I'll move to approve with the amendments that the city attorney is proposing.
And I'll second.
Alderman Benning and Alderman Plaitner. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none. All in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, unanimous on that. Review and possible action regarding proposed distribution easement, underground electric, We Energies request regarding Newport Shores project.
May I take that one?
Sure, you can have it all.
Last time this matter was put over because of the imprecision, I think, of the drawing that was submitted along with the written easement. Now you've got 2 drawings, one thanks to Mr. McCain and also one thanks to We Energies, which I think more precisely depicts the location of the easement, no part of which crosses over or even touches on the developer's land at Newport Shores. But you can see now the location of that easement. I didn't see, but I'm not qualified to read these things with any degree of reliability. I didn't see the location of the transformer pedestal. But Mr. McCain, can you describe where that would be? And I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I'm getting some feedback too. Bob, do you have the ability to show the diagram that I put together for the body here tonight?
It's in the council packet, I think.
Oh, sure. So long story short, then while we wait for that to fire up, the intent of this is we've got a planting bed that we'll be constructing adjacent to the pier that this pedestal serves. And according to We Energies, we need to be within X amount of distance of what we're serving. So it's kind of a perfectly natural place for this to land because there is a landscaped area closest to the pier. And when Rob and I've toured the site, it became pretty clear that on the final plan for our new configuration that this was the most obvious proper spot for the location of the pedestal. So on my diagram, that pedestal would be at essentially the end of the dotted line that I've superimposed on our site plan. So I don't have a perfect tool to make this be 100% perfect to scale, just to be clear. And on this copy, it's really, really hard to see what's going on. I can point it out on the original PDF I made if that'd be helpful. I can pull that up. But functionally, right at the end of that pier, between the parking stalls that we have the agreement on that are for weekend use of the marina tenants, and that pier is a wedge shape of planting bed. That's where this pedestal would land.
That's all I have. I've reviewed the easement agreement in terms of its provisions, and I approve the same.
Any questions? We have a motion and a second.
I'll move to approve.
Alderman Plaitner. A second.
Second.
Alderman Benning. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Unanimous again, Susan? New business. Consideration and possible action on the 14th amended agreement for the operation of the Mid-Moraine Municipal Court.
I take
Tony?
this one, Mr. Mayor. So really, this amendment is straightforward. It's to add the town of Polk as a member of the Mid-Moraine Municipal Court. So within this agreement, it lists them. In addition to doing that, it adds some kind of cleanup language related to the clerk, some of the procedures in voting, along with language regarding the voting members. The court clerk is looking for each participating municipality to approve the agreement and return a signed copy by March 31st of 2021. This has not been reviewed by the city attorney yet, but due to kind of the rather straightforward nature of this, we'll certainly do that. But again, it's really standard fare of just adding a member to the court.
I have reviewed it, Mr. City Administrator, and it's fine. And I'll just take this moment to give an unpaid commercial endorsement for our municipal court system from Judge Christine Olis to Kathy Booth, the clerk of court, and all of her deputy clerks. It's a fantastic court to work with. I think it's the second largest municipal court in the state in terms of number of cases processed, second only to Milwaukee, City of Milwaukee Municipal Court. And I've been in a lot of courts over a lot of years, and they are the most user-friendly, polite, motivated group. If you ever have the misfortune of standing in front of Judge Olis, you can feel comfortable because it's just a great court.
And you'll efficiently at least get through the process if you come before the court?
Is it efficient?
You will efficiently go through the court and its processes if you have to go to it. Is that part of the endorsement too?
I was gonna say, are you talking from experience, Tony?
It's very,
No,
it's very,
and I hope not.
it's very efficient, yes. And I won't say it's fun, but it's efficient as it can possibly be, so.
Can I ask a question?
Kudos to them.
So we were talking about this before. There's been court since the new system is in, and the judge, everything worked okay for her?
Yes, yeah, I
Okay.
think she's very happy. Now, we haven't had a trial where we'd have to fire up the laptop with, video of an arrest, but I'm looking forward to that day. That could be March 9th when there'll be 5 trials held in this room. If you're bored, come on down and.
Really, March 9th?
Bring some popcorn. Yeah, there's five stacked up, so.
So you're gonna tell me that if I come in on March 9th and come through that door with a big thing of popcorn, the judge is gonna be okay with it?
No, not the popcorn. You'd have to eat that outside, maybe looking through the door or something, but you'll be entertained, I assure you.
Can I bring donuts for the judge? Does she like donuts?
I don't think during court time. No, that would be a bad
before.
idea.
I mean.
Before, after, that's fine. Probably after would look the best, not to give her donuts before, but it's a great court.
Okay, March 9th. I think I'll show up. Okay, so can we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Alderman Plaitner, who's moving it along.
Second.
Alderman Benning. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous again. Forthcoming events, Alderman Plaitner.
Valentine's Day coming up here pretty quickly. She's not just the mother of my children, she's also my wife.
Oh, I was going pheasant hunting on Valentine's Day. Is that okay?
It's okay with Cindy, I think it is.
Well, I think she gets rid of me. And I bring home some nice pheasants and say, could you clean these, dear? That doesn't work. You pay $3 and the guy cleans them for you. Yeah. Anybody else forthcoming event? Any birthdays, anniversaries? And how's Quinn?
She's lovely. She's just past 10 pounds, so she's gaining weight. She's eating, she's pooping, she's sleeping. It's great.
Sounds like me. Okay. Well, when you're old, what do you look forward to? Public appearances and comments? Anybody on the phone? Nobody in the audience? Hearing none? I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Alderwoman Postle, Alderman Newmeyer, all in favor say aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.